Hey, it's Lee and Mike, and we're here today with Alex Erdos. He's Vice President at CBRE. He's going to give us a little color on the state of the commercial leasing market in and around New York City. Alex, what's up?
Not much. How you guys doing?
Hanging in there.
Glad to hear it.
That's the 2000th time I've said that in
Absolutely.
how many months. But no,
Yeah.
we're excited to have you on because I think one of the things we've been thinking about and a lot of clients are talking about, really everybody's talking about is, when are we going to get back to some normalcy? And especially for those of us who are hiding out in the burbs, when can we expect to be back in the office? Is that going to be full force? So maybe we can kick off with that and then talk about some of the other aspects of the market that you're seeing.
For sure. So I think at the low end, I think we got down to about 5% average occupancy of office buildings in the city,
Right.
and at this point, we're probably more than triple that at 15-20%. It sounds to me, and it sounds to what we've been seeing in general, is just that it's not going to be kind of polarized, everyone coming back 5 days a week all at once, and it's not necessarily going to be the opposite, that everyone's 100% work from home. Most groups, if given the option, and Salesforce was a good example of a company that did this, they said you can either go in every day, you can never go in, or you can do a hybrid. And the majority have been picking hybrid. And whether it's a staggered teams kind of approach or it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, regardless of what it is, people are trying to figure out how they're going to balance the hybrid level. And if you're all going in the same day, you probably need the same footprint, and it isn't going to be much of a difference, from an optics point of view. Essentially, everyone's still going to be in the office those days. But if you stagger it in a team approach, it's going to feel a lot less populated. But it seems like you can't really unsee what's going on, and you can't really go back from work from home. But people are definitely eager to return, so it certainly seems like a hybrid is the way that people are trending.
Interesting. And do you think I'm thinking in terms of like the way a law firm uses a space where there's perimeter offices with windows, and then you have kind of bullpens with administrative support. I'm not sure which way this is going to go, and maybe it's yet to be determined. Are we looking at more of segmented offices like that, where other types of industries want to give people their own space, or the opposite, where you say, well, if we're hybrid, do we really need those offices at all? Do we just go kind of flat and have, like, my kids go to school with plexiglass around their desk, and I feel like that could become the model for maybe the workforce also.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think you've seen a lot of press, undoubtedly, post open workplace where everything was benching and increasing in density, and people were just in kind of a factory of desks. And you saw a lot of backlash from that, and how people don't actually like the open work environment. I think if anything, this is an excuse to trend further away from that. No one's really excited to work in a big desk farm, and no one's excited to be sitting on someone else's lap, especially in this post-COVID environment. I think people are still going to be very cognizant of how close they're sitting to other people, even post-vaccine. People still want to have their own space. I think there's a few themes. I think it's very use-based for the office, right? So I think there's going to be breakout rooms, there's going to be phone rooms, there's going to be some private offices depending on your role in an organization. Obviously, all of this is going to be dependent on individual organizations. But I also think we're seeing a lot of groups that are really reframing the way that they're utilizing the office space, and not necessarily looking at it as just a place to buckle down and do a lot of heads down work. You can do that effectively at home, depending on what your home life is like, and if you have little kids like us running around. But I think a lot of groups are saying we really want it to be more of a collaborative type showpiece. This is going to be for larger group meetings. This is going to be for more kind of collaborative interactions. So I really think it A, depends on the organization. And I think B, it also just depends on how you're looking at the office, and what the purposes are and the goals are of having that space available to you.
Right.
So, based on what you're saying, it sounds like the office space of the future is going to kind of necessitate more of a hybrid work environment, because there's just not going to be the space for a fully staffed office to operate.
I think it again, that's a question for each organization. I think some organizations are definitely going to end up shrinking. I think if it's law firms, accounting firms, they're downsizing because that's just direct, if income out of the out of the partnership's pockets essentially. And also, a lot of younger associates, once they're onboarded, once they're kind of socialized into an organization, they really are doing a lot of heads down work. And in that sense, you can still track hours and you can still work very effectively from home. So certain organizations for sure, it's going to be there just won't be space for kind of a full staff. But I think others are really, you look at the tech industry and, the large, like the kind of tech giants are absolutely doubling down on space because they're reframing how they're using the office. They're really thinking, how is this going to be a collaborative type of, destination? And how is it going to be kind of the centerpiece of our organization so that we really are defining and creating culture here? Because, I think a year is when everyone says you start to form habits, right? And I think it's also when you start to forget what cultures are like. So you're getting deep into a routine, of working from home or potentially hybrid. You go in a few days a week, like myself. I think you also, if you haven't been with an organization or you haven't been with your team for that long, you can easily forget what that culture is like. So I think yes and no. I definitely believe that groups are going to start to try and retranche their office holdings just so that they can really utilize them to the best of their potential.
I know we've kind of talked offline before about the types of industries that are eating up space. You just touched on one of them, the big tech giants, but uh, what else is out there? Because really, that's becoming kind of a monopoly of sorts with the Facebooks and Amazons and I almost said Yahoo. I don't know where that came from, but Google of the world. What other types of businesses are starting to look at space? Just out in the wings.
So our team has a pretty good focus on life science and healthcare. So I mean, life science industry is pretty unique just because obviously if you're a lab user, you need to be in space. You can't do bench work, in your house unless there's something that I don't know. Um, it's just obviously more conducive to people coming into the office, coming into the lab, having a culture, and also the fact that you're just already kind of naturally socially distant and wearing PPE anyway in most labs. So
right.
Lab work was kind of one area where it kind of just continued on during COVID, aside from the fact that a lot of these groups were either focused on vaccine units or testing facilities of some kind or increasing testing capacity or speed. So I think that's one area that's been seeing a lot of growth and will continue to for sure. The healthcare institutions as well are always kind of have an insatiable appetite for space and have recently been transacting quite a bit. And I think obviously this pandemic has put quite a load on our healthcare system, and we'll continue to down the road. So those are two areas that definitely we see a lot of uptick in activity. Also, I would say anything in the financial services sector that is not really back office, any group that has a sales and trading team of any kind, anything with any type of collaborative workforce, we're seeing activity there. Certainly more hedge funds rather than private equity firms. Private equity has historically been an area where there's a lot of travel anyway. So you see a lot of people working remotely there, and they've been a little bit slower to come back. But I think anything with a team-based sales focus, you're going to see a lot more occupancy.
That makes perfect sense.
Alex, that's great. Certainly we're interested in kind of staying in the loop with respect to what's happening. I know it's evolving at a rapid speed, and news affects things in ways that you can't necessarily foresee. But it sounds like on the whole that things are moving forward. It might be slower than some might hope, but it does seem like we're kind of on a path towards having a lot of good news to report in the coming months.
Yeah, I think that's very accurate. I mean, I think we're definitely getting to the point of seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. Activity has been up significantly, even if it's not necessarily transaction velocity, just tour activity, speaking to clients, just it feels a lot more alive out there. And I think a lot of it is anticipatory and knowing that the vaccine is effective and that people are starting to contemplate returning to the office has just, stoked a lot of interest in getting ahead of what inevitably is going to be a pricing readjustment once there actually is some velocity. We always say leasing is always a lagging indicator. It was, at the beginning of the pandemic, everyone immediately, the first question was, what is the adjustment? What is the discount? How do we adjust for this? And we're still seeing those economics shake out. So I think this is going to be a swing in the other direction. I think, again, it's going to lag, but definitely positive indicators on a lot of sides there.
Yeah, we've seen some of that with, landlords in existing spaces not totally sure what to do with their then existing tenants. Do I try to renegotiate? Does it make more sense to kind of cut ties and look for maybe a more compatible long-term partner? I think to your point, they're not totally sure of how the economics are going to play out, so they're kind of taking their time and making that decision. And tenants, on the other side of the coin, are also taking their time to decide: do I want to stay in my existing space? Do I want to kind of hibernate offline for a while and then look for a better space for kind of the new phase of my business? So we're seeing that play out in kind of real time in landlord tenant conversations.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it just depends on how the owner itself is just financially structured. A lot of the family owners and building owners that are, over 90% leased, if you have a good solid tenancy already and you're sitting there cash flowing, you have a little bit of space, maybe you wait for that creditworthy tenant. If you're sitting on a half vacant building, you might have to adjust more quickly.
Right.
Well, this has been really helpful. It's great to kind of hear what's going on in the market, and we look forward to continuing the conversation over the next few weeks.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.